The Canadian Prophetic Council is a gathering really of prophets of the nation. It started with Stacey Campbell a number of years ago. The Lord spoke to Stacey to gather the prophetic voices of Canada. It's interesting because in, for example, the nation of America, where there have been real recognized prophets, where there's been gatherings for many, many years, and there really was not a similar one in Canada. So Stacey, with Patricia King's help, but Stacey got it going, and I really appreciated what she did in starting this some years ago. I'm trying to remember the actual date that it began. I would think around the time of 2005. The Canadian Prophetic Council started, and where it was like she was calling the prophets out of the caves. There's something about Canada that has not recognized their prophets, or their prophets have gone to America, to be really honest. Like there's the Phoebe Palmer or John G. Lake. He was born 5 minutes from where I grew up in, he was born in St. Mary's, Ontario. Amy Semple McPherson, she was born in Salford, Ontario, and she, went to America. On and on and on. We could talk about all the ones, even the Patricia King, Stacey Campbell, gone to America. So why? It's because Canada hasn't been super kind to the prophets. Canada hasn't necessarily honored them. In the words of one prophet I know, she said it was like at the tall poppy syndrome. If you look it up, the tall poppy syndrome means is where, the one poppy that rises its head above the others and gets chopped down. And there tends to be a bit of a different spirit in other nations, where more of a celebration. Hey, rise up, go for it, be all that God wants you to be. But in Canada, there tends to be a bit of a competition, comparison, don't want anybody to really soar. So I do believe that that's a spirit that needs to be broken in Canada. But getting back to the Canadian Prophetic Council, Stacey began to call the prophets out of hiding or out of obscurity or out of where are you, and started to gather them. And it was proving effective. So I led, right from the beginning of the Canadian Prophetic Council, I led the Ontario Prophetic Council. So I started a council within the Council of the Prophetic Voices of Ontario, and that grew into a good, strong group. And so then Stacey asked me to lead the Canadian Prophetic Council, which I did for a period of time, but I've recently passed it off to Fatine, who's doing a great job, because Fatine is such an amazing organizer and shaper and mover, and so she's really getting it going to a new level. So it's really prophetic voices from coast to coast that share words on email or on Zoom calls. There's Zoom calls, there's calls where we come together, and then there's gatherings in person to person. Usually about once a year there's a gathering, because it's a big country, so only once a year usually is there a gathering all together. And it's to hear what the Lord is saying, to pray into what the Lord is saying, and then to get this information out into all our spheres of influence. So there'll be prophets on there that have their own ministries, or there's those that are connected closely to church ministries that get information out about what to pray into, about what is the Lord saying in this day, in this hour. And so that's what the Canadian Prophetic Council is. I passed off the Ontario Prophetic Council leadership to a guy by the name of Joe Garcia. So not all the provinces have their own prophetic councils. British Columbia does, Ontario does, and I think there might be a few other provinces, but mostly not every province has their own council. But there is a group of, I think it's around the vicinity now of 40 people, 40 to 50 people across the country that consist of the Canadian Prophetic Council. Once again, it's gathering the prophets together to hear from heaven, but really to fuel prayer across the nation. There is a website, you can look it up, just Google Canadian Prophetic Council. You can see the website, some of the more recent words, as well as what to pray into. Some of the things are shared just within the council, but some of them are shared publicly on that website.